Blog Talk Radio.
You are listening to the Pro Football Podcast daily here on Blog Talk Radio. Here is your host, Mike Noto.
And welcome to episode 2 of the Pro Football Podcast here on Blog Talk Radio. It's Thursday, May 9th. And look, the second episode here, guys. Feel free to join the conversation. You can catch me on Twitter at ProFootballPod. That's at ProFootballPod. You can always catch me on email too, profootballpodcast@gmail.com. We'll get into our kickoff stories to start off the show here in a second, but I'm very pleased to announce we have Ryan Alfiere. Ryan is a writer for BleacherReport.com. He's also a writer for NYJetsDraft.com, and you can catch him on Twitter at RyanAlf17. That's RYAN Alf17. And I'm pleasure to have Ryan on the show. And Ryan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem, man. Thanks for coming on. And Ryan, one of the things that came out today regarding the Jets, and I know the Jets are your specialty. I know you're a Jets fan just like I am. And Santonio Holmes came out today in support of Mark Sanchez, which I know surprised me because of the tenuous relationship that the two had, or maybe still have. What do you make of the comments that Holmes came out today and overly in support of Mark Sanchez?
Well, honestly, I don't really think a lot of what Anthony Holmes says really matters in the long run. I mean, the winner of the quarterback competition is going to be decided by the coaches, but at the same time, it is kind of interesting considering the fact that they were on bad terms a couple years ago. So that's obviously behind them now, which is a good thing. But I wouldn't read too far into what Holmes says.
Yeah, I think I catch your drift there. And, I had the feeling with a guy like Santonio Holmes, whoever that favorite ends up being in that quarterback battle, he'll probably just say nice things about them too. I think he's just the kind of guy who'll do anything to get the ball thrown to him. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can see that. I know he's always said things about how I remember him saying last year about like how he hated the pass interference calls he was getting because it doesn't count towards his stats.
Absolutely.
He's all about stats. He's all about, make sure that he looks good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the play of Santonio Holmes will certainly play itself out. And, we got into Mark Sanchez a little bit. And, this quarterback battle that will play out here in the next couple of months and all throughout training camp will feature, Mark Sanchez, David Garrard, and Geno Smith. And, hey, I just wondering, Ryan, what you think. If all three of those quarterbacks are on the roster come week one, barring injury or anyone getting released, of course, can you envision any scenario where Geno Smith is the week one starter?
Well, I think he'll be the starter if he outplays the other guys. I think that I don't know if this is like when Sanchez was a rookie, where if it was even close, I think they were going to start Sanchez. I don't know if it's like that this time around. If Sanchez is the best guy, they'll go with Sanchez. If Garrard's the best guy, they'll go with Garrard, and the same with Smith. Because especially when he holds Vick, if he loses this year, he might be done. So he's not going to sacrifice his job so that Geno gets more time on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope, as a Jets fan that, they do give the job to the best guy and the guy that performs the best, like you said, so we get the best guy on the field. Hopefully there's not any preconceived notions or a guy they're leaning towards giving the job, and they give everyone a fair shot there. And, Ryan, something I thought, an interesting trade I thought on draft day was the Jets trading for Chris Ivory. They trade a fourth-round pick for the running back from New Orleans who was buried on their depth chart. He's only 25 years old. What are your thoughts of that Chris Ivory trade, and do you think they could have gotten a better back with that fourth-round pick?
In terms of talent and I don't, with the guys left on the board, I don't think so. I'm only time will tell, but Ivory's a really good runner. He's physical. He's fast. He has an injury history, but if he tends to stay healthy, he could really be a star. But the thing I like about the Ivory trade is that he never really got a lot of money, which is good. Because if you pay a guy a lot of money and you give him a pick and he's an injury prone guy, that's usually not a good formula. So they do have guys behind him in Powell and Goodson, but overall I like the deal.
Yeah, I do too. And to say a guy, like a Jonathan Franklin, for instance, is going to be as good as Chris Ivory, I don't think you can say that. And I love the fact that the guy is only 25 years old and, like you said, is still hungry and still playing for that big contract. Other than, all of the all the trades for the Jets have certainly been the story of their offseason. And, the man who came in to orchestrate all those trades was GM John Idzik. And, what are your thoughts on what John Idzik has done with this Jets roster since he became the general manager?
Well, really, the only thing I don't like was the Revis trade, and I don't really know if that was all him. I think that was more of a accumulation of a lot of things that have gone wrong with the organization where they had to trade him. But otherwise, I can't look at one thing and say, wow, he really messed up. Or I thought in the draft, I thought he was patient and they stuck to the board. I would have done a couple of things differently, but they didn't reach. And they got good players, and they weren't aggressive in free agency, which was expected, but they got a couple of good guys for not that much money. So I like his plan, and I think he's sticking to it, which is really all you can ask for.
Yeah, you know what, Ryan? You bring up an excellent point there towards the end where I like that this guy came in with a plan, he's sticking to the plan, and I think you're seeing now him having more of a say in this personnel than maybe Tannenbaum did as it came out that maybe Rex had a lot of hand in those personnel decisions, at least towards the end of Tannenbaum's tenure. And to end things here, Ryan, just interested in what you thought. Pro Football Talk is doing a Mount Rushmore series for each team. They're basically asking fans who they think the top 4 players would be on their team's Mount Rushmore. Who would be your Mount Rushmore for the Jets?
I would have to go with Namath, obviously. I would put Klecko on there, Don Maynard, and Curtis Martin. Yeah, you know what?
Rivas, that's the exact 4 that I had too. With a team like the Jets, you don't have many options,
Yeah, if Rivas hung around, I would have put him on, but I can't now.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree with me. I know you watch the Jets just as much as I do, and Rivas was the best defensive player I've ever seen on the Jets, and it's a shame how things worked out, but
yeah.
Well, Ryan, thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time out of your busy schedule, to join me here, guys. Be sure to catch Ryan on Bleacher Report and on nyjetsdraft.com, and also catch him on Twitter because he's dropping knowledge today about the collective bargaining agreement and a whole bunch of stuff on Twitter. So be sure to check him out at RyanAlf17, at RyanALF17. Ryan, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Have a good day. All right, guys. Again, that was Ryan Alfiere from Bleacher Report, and I mean it when I say you guys should definitely all go check him out. He does some great stuff there on Bleacher Report and on the draft website as well. Now, guys, first down here. First down, getting into the big stories of the day from the NFL. We're kind of sort of what most people think are we're entering the dog days of the NFL here. Maybe not a lot going on, but if you're a football junkie like me, you always find stuff that interests you. And the thing I wanted to mention today, first and foremost, was the trade today that the Ravens pulled off for AQ Shipley. AQ Shipley was a center for the Indianapolis Colts last year. He saw some action in some crucial moments for the Colts, graded out very well in all of those higher level grading systems that you see Pro Football Focus use, for instance. And the Ravens get him from the Colts for a conditional pick. And this is a guy the Ravens will most likely end up starting at the center position. And if you see what Colts fans, Colts writers, Colts bloggers are saying about this deal, you kind of think that maybe Ryan Grigson, I don't want to say got ripped off, but maybe didn't make the smartest trade here. And mainly because, one, like I said before, Shipley's a pretty good player. But number two, Samson Satele, their current center, struggled a little bit last year, makes a pretty hefty salary for a guy that plays at his level. They're now pretty much stuck where if they want to cut him, they can't because they got rid of Shipley. And you wonder, for a conditional pick, was it worth losing the depth and overall quality of player that a guy like Shipley is? And I can tell you what, if you're a Colts writer or a Colts blogger, from what I've seen, you certainly don't agree with it. And we'll see how this plays out. But Ozzie Newsome has entered that rare level where everything he does, it seems like it's coming out in spades. And if you remember back at the beginning of the off season when the Ravens were losing all these players, how are the Ravens going to come back? And just look how they've afforded themselves here. Certainly in the past couple months and in the draft. And AQ Shipley, a name to look out for this upcoming season. The Eagles, next on our first down segment here, because the news coming out today that Michael Vick was taking the first team reps, which is not a surprise. I don't think Michael Vick starting out as the incumbent, if you will, at the quarterback position is a surprise. At least it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But you wonder how this quarterback situation is going to take shape. Because to me, they have two guys who fit the spread offense, Michael Vick and probably fourth-string quarterback Dennis Dixon. Then they have two traditional drop-back passers, Nick Foles and, of course, Matt Barkley, who they drafted in the fourth round of this draft. And I think this is one of the most intriguing stories, at least to start the season, is how does Chip Kelly come out? Is he inventive? Does he use two quarterbacks, three quarterbacks? Does he just decide on one? It still remains to be seen, and I know I'm kind of hanging on edge seeing how he handles this situation. But I think when all is said and done, you see Vick start and maybe see a sort of combo here. But, again, Vick taking the first team reps with the Eagles. The Buffalo Bills next in our first down segment. In the news that comes out that they may cut Brad Smith. And while Brad Smith isn't what he was when he was with the Jets and he was kind of like an ultimate slash kind of player, lining up in the Wildcat, returning kicks, making a lot of big plays for the Jets, which earned them a very big contract with the Buffalo Bills. At the time, I thought the Buffalo Bills probably overpaid for him, and I think that's sort of ringing true here as he advances in this contract. And if the Bills do cut Smith, they'll save $2 million against the cap. There will certainly be interest in a guy like Brad Smith if he hits the open market. And you wonder, same teams who are interested in Josh Cribbs, would they turn their attention to Brad Smith? I think that's why I think it's important that Josh Cribbs signs with the team maybe before Brad Smith does get released by the Bills if it's eventually going to happen. Because look, a team like the Giants, for instance, if they're interested in Josh Cribbs, why wouldn't they be interested in Brad Smith? A team like the Jets, same thing. Maybe Brad Smith being reunited with his old team if there's not a lot of bad blood there. But that's a situation to monitor. The Bills cutting Brad Smith and how that affects the market for do-everything return man receiver Josh Cribbs, formerly of the Cleveland Browns. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they were in the news yesterday because Rondé Barber is going to retire. Today, I was reading something to the effect that they're not interested in signing Dwight Freeney or John Abraham. And I sort of wonder out loud about this, why they don't at least have an interest in one of those guys. Why do I say that? Look, their defensive ends going into this year, because remember, Michael Bennett is gone. Michael Bennett is a member of the Seahawks. Their defensive ends going into this year are Daquan Bowers and Adrian Claiborne. Are they good enough where you can say, hey, we don't need a veteran guy like an Abraham or a Freeney to come in? We can go to battle. We can play in our tough division with all those good quarterbacks with those two guys at defensive end. I personally think they should fortify that position a little bit, maybe wait a little bit and get Freeney or Abraham at a more cost-favorable price. But nonetheless, I really think they should take a second look at acquiring one of those two guys because not that Bowers and Claiborne are lost causes, but look, this team has done everything to win right now. And I think at that position, they can do better, and there's guys available that can make them better at that position. All right, guys, that's our first down segment and our interview right at the top spot there, the kickoff spot with Ryan Alfiere. But we'll get into our look around the league now, and we'll start off with the AFC East and more in particular the Miami Dolphins. And, the Miami Dolphins, one of the sort of, question marks you could say for them going into the season, in my mind, is their cornerback situation. And you might say, hey, they signed Brent Grimes. They drafted Jamar Taylor. What's the problem? Well, Jamar Taylor, for one, is not a huge guy, a guy that some people questioned whether he could play outside at the cornerback position from day one. I think ideally what the Dolphins would like is for Brent Grimes to come back sound from his ACL injury last year and take one of those corner spots, and then hope Richard Marshall, who's coming off of back surgery himself, can assume that other cornerback's position. Now, Marshall's an interesting case because he's due $4 million this year, and he could become a prime candidate's cut if Jamar Taylor ever beats him out in training camp. But I think ideally, if you're a Dolphins coach, Marshall and Grimes win those two outside corner spots. You sort of ease Jamar Taylor in starting at that slot position and then see what he can do from there. But definitely a situation to keep an eye on, especially if you're a Dolphins fan, because that secondary was absolutely awful last year. The New England Patriots, the Patriots signed Lavelle Hawkins today, a wide receiver, to a 2-year deal, probably a typical Patriots contract they've been giving out this offseason. There's probably little to no guaranteed money in the deal. And, a reporter in one of the Boston papers was sort of speculating that, the only two receivers this year for the Patriots that are probably guaranteed a roster spot are Aaron Dobson, who they drafted out of Marshall, and Danny Amendola, who, of course, was the free agent signing, the guy that's presumably going to take Wes Welker's spot. And, I thought about that for a while, and it sort of makes sense, right? Because Edelman has injury problems. Who knows when he's back and how he performs in training camp. I think, though, in the end, Edelman's versatility will get him a spot on the roster. And then you have guys like, Donald Jones, now Lavelle Hawkins, okay, and a couple of other guys they brought in who are slipping my mind right now. And you just have a big jumble at receiver for the Patriots. And I think what really hurt them was the Steelers matching that offer sheet on Emmanuel Sanders. I think it was a calculated risk they took, and I think it sort of backfired on them. And we'll see. They may be crawling back to Brandon Lloyd if this keeps up. But again, the Patriots, that wide receiver position, it's just such a huge question mark heading into the season. And I would have to think in private moments, Tom Brady is not happy at all about how this offseason has gone for his offensive side of the ball. The AFC North, the next division up here, and our look around the league, and the Bengals and their running back position. We just talked about the Patriots wide receiver issues. What about the Bengals at running back? The Bengals had Benjarvis Green-Ellis last year. They signed him from the New England Patriots. He was a little bit underwhelming last year, only averaging a shade under 4 yards a carry at 3.9. The Bengals draft Gio Bernard, the running back out of North Carolina, and it's pretty easy to connect the dots that they'll probably use Gio Bernard initially in passing down situations and sporadically to spell Benjarvis Green-Ellis. And you have to really wonder what happens from this point on with Benjarvis Green-Ellis. Okay, does he command that starting position? Is he replaced by someone? Is he replaced by Gio Bernard in that starting lineup permanently if Bernard proves himself as the scat back or third down back? Because remember, Bernard was an every down back at North Carolina. He wasn't a scat back. He's very shifty, good at changing directions, good at hitting the holes. And if he develops, I think you could see Benjarvis Green-Ellis maybe be on the outs there. Maybe not next year, but certainly maybe in 2014. And Bernard might be a good guy to keep an eye on in the later rounds of a fantasy draft because of that reason. The Steelers, got away from what they do best last year. The Steelers are known as a running team on offense, right? You think of a Jerome Bettis, you think of a Bam Morris back in the day running the football. And you also think on defense of linebackers. You think of Ham, you think of Lambert, you think of Kevin Green, all right? You think of Greg Lloyd. Most recently, you think of James Harrison. And, Lamar Woodley was a guy that was thought to be getting into that sort of legendary mold for the Steelers. And he's a guy who's had a rough, tough couple seasons. Okay, missed some time last year with injuries, and word is he's really recommitting himself in the off-season workouts. And for Steelers fans to sit back for a second and think about a rejuvenated Lamar Woodley to go along with a guy who I thought was the steal of the first round, Jarvis Jones, lasting to the middle of that round and falls to the Steelers at, I believe it was pick 17. Again, great job by the Steelers front office as usual, right? But you get a healthy Woodley, a motivated Woodley, and Jarvis Jones having something to prove after dropping in the draft. That could be a scary combination, and one I'm looking forward to watching this upcoming season. Going from the Steelers to the Browns, and more specifically Rob Chudzinski. You start looking in Rob Chudzinski's background as a coach, and you really look at, wow, this guy, if there's one thing he's produced in his career or helped cultivate in his career, is the talent of tight ends. You think about some of the tight ends he's coached, whether it's Antonio Gates in his time with the Chargers, whether it's Kellen Winslow during his first stint with the Browns as the offensive coordinator, or most recently, Greg Olsen down in Carolina. And you're teaming Rob Chudzinski up with Norv Turner, who obviously has a long history with tight ends as well, going back to Jay Novacek and also with Gates. Jordan Cameron is going to be the starting tight end by all accounts in Cleveland this year. Can he burst on the scene and be that next Gates, Winslow, Olsen type player and really maybe prove dividends not only for the Browns on the field, but for certainly the development of young Brandon Weeden, who is thought he's going to get every chance to be the starter there for the Browns. Let's transition from the AFC North into the AFC South. And, the Texans, yesterday, right, we I don't know if I let off the show, but one of the first stories was about Ed Reed and his hip injury. And now you have Darryl Sharpton also recovering from hip surgery. And, the Texans might be counting on Sharpton, the linebacker there, to play alongside Brian Cushing. The word is Sharpton will be ready for OTAs, but he'll be competing with Tim Dobbins for that starting linebacker spot next to Cushing. And we'll see how Cushing comes back this year. We'll see how Sharpton comes back this year. And overall, I know the Texans are a team that is sort of a veteran, more of a veteran team now, right? You have Ed Reed, J.J. Watt with another year under his belt. Certainly Matt Schaub, a seasoned veteran to go along with Arian Foster and Andre Johnson. It'd be interesting to see how this team responds from the injuries, first of all, and most importantly, from a season that sort of got away from them last year when they struggled down the stretch, lost the home field advantage, and sort of the rest is history leading up to that playoff loss at New England. The Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that probably doesn't have to worry about the playoffs for a little while. What they do have to worry about, though, is getting a quarterback to eventually get them to the playoffs on a consistent basis. And that's why it's leading to it's a very big season for Blaine Gabbert. He started 24 games so far as a professional quarterback. I think we can all agree we probably haven't seen much from him that really makes us believe he's the quarterback of the future. He's getting more than a fair shot, in my mind, at being the long-term quarterback for this team. David Caldwell came out today, the GM, and said he will get a chance this year to see if he can be, again, that long-term solution at the quarterback position. So just ask Jaguars fans, do you think he can be that long-term solution? As of right now, I don't have the confidence of what I've seen that he can be that long-term solution, both from an injury standpoint and from an on-the-field performance standpoint. But, hey, I'm always up for a good debate, so let me know if you guys believe in Blaine Gabbert as the Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback. The last division here, as we go around the AFC West, and look, the Denver Broncos contract situation with Ryan Clady has sort of gone under the radar. I mean, you have a guy in Ryan Clady who's obviously an extremely important part of that Broncos offensive line, protecting Peyton Manning's blind side. And they franchised him for a little bit over a $9 million tender. Clady has not yet signed that tender. And we're creeping towards, training camp here and that July 15th deadline. But you haven't heard much about this. I think between the issues with Elvis Dumerville that the Broncos had, and overall just the way they run their organization, this has sort of been quiet and not really rearing its ugly head yet. Maybe in Denver it has, but I know as a national story, a guy with this caliber of player, we haven't heard much about it. Does Ryan Clady end up holding out? Does he end up signing the franchise tender? Trying to get a little local opinion on this, on how, sort of what the tea leaves are saying with the Ryan Clady situation. The Oakland Raiders, traded back in the first round from 3 all the way back to the Dolphins pick at 13, and they picked DJ Hayden, the cornerback from Houston. And, at the time they picked Hayden, first of all, if you know Hayden's story and what he came back from last year, having a freak injury to one of the heart valves, an injury that 95% of the people that get it die. He comes all the way back, performs well enough for teams to consider drafting him, and not only consider drafting him, but obviously in the Raiders' case, they fall in love with the guy, and they take him in the top 15 of the draft. And, how big of a risk was that pick, though? You had some GMs tell Peter King that they weren't even considering taking him because of that injury he had, and the Raiders think highly enough of him to take him in the top 15. And I sort of take the opinion on this that I'm going to trust Reggie McKenzie, because almost every other move he's made this offseason, I've totally agreed with. From the Matt Flynn trade to the host of linebackers he picked up to some of the players he picked in the draft, including DJ Hayden. So, I'm going to agree with go roll at Reggie McKenzie here, sort of until I get proven wrong here. But again, DJ Hayden, how much of a risk is he? Let me know what you think. The Kansas City Chiefs are up next here, and the Chiefs gave up a second-round pick this year for Alex Smith to the 49ers. We know this, but they also gave up a conditional pick. And something I read today is if the Chiefs go 8-8, which I don't think is completely out of the realm of possibilities, that pick turns into a second-round pick again for the 49ers. Now, if the Chiefs go 8-8, 9-7, that'll be a middle of the second-round pick. But still, just a great trade. You get a guy in Alex Smith who basically did nothing for 5 or 6 years for your franchise. He has one and a half really good years, and you flip that into possibly 2 number 2 picks. And by the way, have a young quarterback that's an absolute freak that's getting paid minimal money right now as you're a Super Bowl level team. I mean, I understand why the Chiefs had to do that trade. If they didn't think there was a quarterback in the draft, they had to do the trade. But again, Trent Baalke and that 49ers front office and coaching staff and players, they just got a real good thing going there right now. And that could turn out to be a big coup for them if that does turn into a second-round pick. The San Diego Chargers, you think San Diego Chargers, you think that offensive line, unfortunately, and how bad it is. And can they protect Rivers enough for Rivers to get back to the level he was at just a couple seasons ago under Norv Turner? And, you got to remember now, it's a different situation for Rivers. Mike McCoy is not the coach that drafted him. Tom Telesco is not the GM that drafted him. How long of a rope do they have with Phillip Rivers? I don't think they have anyone on the roster now that rivals Rivers in terms of talent. But if Rivers has a bad year this year, or let's say an average year, let's say 25 touchdowns, 18 interceptions, do we see them draft or go out and get a quarterback via free agency? I think that's definitely a situation to monitor, and I think whether Rivers plays good or not is going to depend on that offensive line. I personally believe in Rivers. I think he can get back to that form of, let's say, 3 years ago, where he was one of the top quarterbacks in the AFC and in the NFL for a period of time there. But he's not mobile, and he needs a line, and we'll see if they can develop that line this year to be better than it was last year. That's the AFC, guys. Team-by-team analysis here after our top stories, and we'll get to the NFC now. And the NFC, more in particular the Cowboys, Gerald Sensabaugh, who spent the last 4 seasons as the safety of the Cowboys. He's only 30 years old, but he's made the decision to retire, and he signed a one-day contract with the Cowboys to retire as a Cowboy, and definitely nice of the organization to do that for him, let him retire as a Cowboy. Sensabaugh, he's 30 years old. Sure, that might be a little bit young to retire. But you're talking about a guy that was a 5th-round pick in 2005 of the Jaguars, and for a guy like him, a 5th-round pick, to have the career he had, for the 7 years that he played, 8 years that he played, good job by Gerald Sensabaugh. If he thinks now this is his time to get out, he's in good health, he wants to begin his second career or second life, I wish him luck. And, again, good luck by the Cowboys letting him retire as a member of the organization. From the Cowboys to their division rival, the New York Giants. And, the Giants turned some heads when they drafted Ryan Nassib in the 4th round of the draft. And it shouldn't be a surprise. If you know the Giants organization and you're familiar with Jerry Reese, they are one of the true best player available on our board drafting teams. And when Jerry Reese was asked today why they drafted Nassib, that was his response. He was the top player on our board, so we took him. I think the whole organization was surprised to see him there at that point in the draft. Jerry Reese drew comparisons to Andy Dalton, actually, which I think is a pretty favorable comparison. Reese, sort of hinted at the it factor that Andy Dalton had, that maybe there's nothing pure about him athletically, or he doesn't have a rocket arm, but there's something about him that makes him a quarterback. And, that's why I like getting this insight from these GMs after the draft, because you try to put your finger on what Ryan Nassib does good, right? Because you're a guy who covers the draft, you're paid to have an opinion, like I do on my YouTube channel, and, look, maybe it's just that he has that it factor, and all the other stuff about him is good enough. He has a good enough arm, good enough athletically. The Washington Redskins are up next here, and something that's been on my mind here as the offseason has progressed, and there was no particular news about the Redskins today sort of breaking or by any means, so thought I'd take some time to sort of give my opinion on the fact that, RG3 is obviously the face of the Redskins and maybe even one of the faces of the NFL. And when you have a guy like that playing in a playoff game against the Seahawks on natural grass in the Northeast in the month of January, I have a big problem with that. This is an organization that has a serious amount of money invested in this quarterback. He's a very talented quarterback. His game is predicated on moving around at this current point, although I'd like to see him stay in the pocket a little bit more because I think he can be a pocket passer. But back to the grass situation. This is a team that needs to get field turf. I would love for someone, I know Daniel Snyder probably doesn't do many interviews, but when he does, or when they get Shanahan in an interview, ask why. Why don't you guys put field turf on that field at FedEx Field? Because I'm not saying that's the reason RG3 got hurt last year, but all I'm saying is we all saw the conditions of that field in that playoff game. It didn't help. Rather than have that be a factor, Snyder's a billionaire, okay? Make the adjustment, put the field turf on there, lengthen this guy's career as long as you can, because as a fan, I love watching the guy play. Moving now to the NFC North, and the NFC North, more in particular, the Chicago Bears. And, the Bears signed John Bostic to a 4-year deal today. John Bostic, a middle linebacker that will compete with DJ Williams for that middle linebacker spot. And, I said this on my draft analysis videos that I do over on YouTube, that I really like this John Bostic pick by the Bears. I didn't like the Kyle Long pick that much, but I like the picks the Bears made after that. And one of those picks was the pick of John Bostic. They signed him to a 4-year deal. I look for him to be that starting middle linebacker. And yes, is he going to be Brian Urlacher from day one? No. Okay? But I think he's going to be a steady guy who will be a starter there. Who's not making prohibitive money because he's not a first-round pick, and can be a guy that they can plug and play in there, and then lengthen their roster in the process because you move DJ Williams, another quality player, to one of the outside linebacker spots to go along with Lance Briggs. The Detroit Lions also signed one of their draft picks today, Larry Warford, the guard from Kentucky. To me, I know guard is not a valued position in the draft, and this was a rare year where you had several guards that were very good, whether it was Chance Warmack or Jonathan Cooper or Kyle Long or Dallas Thomas. But there was a guy I was waiting for him to go off the board, and he finally did in the third round to the Lions, and that was Larry Warford, the guard from Kentucky. And I saw how Warford played against some of the top defensive tackles in the SEC and how good of a job he did against them. And, to make a long story short, it seriously got my attention. And, I think you get a guy in the SEC like a Warmack or a Warford who was a road grader in that league when a lot of the top defensive tackles come from that league. Gee, don't you have to take an extra look at that guy and think that maybe he's worth taking in maybe the late first, second round at least? I was shocked to not see this guy go off the board in the second round, but hey, the Lions get him in the third, and I think they get a gem. The Green Bay Packers, the Packers didn't draft a safety in the first round. They passed up on guys like Matt Elam, who was there, Jonathan Cyprien, who was there, and there was some thinking in Packers fan circles, all right, great, now what are they going to do to replace Charles Woodson? What are they going to do at that other safety spot? And obviously, they're pretty content with either M.D. Jennings or Jerron McMillan to be the starter. And as fans, are you guys good with that? Are you guys good with one of those two guys being the starter for your team? And, no one's going to replace Woodson, but are you okay with them being your starting safety in a division where you're going to have to play against Jay Cutler and Matthew Stafford, etc.? Last team here in the NFC North is the Minnesota Vikings, and they draft Cordero Patterson, in the first round of the draft, and sort of everyone's wondering, the guy has a low Wonderlic score, which I don't take any stock in and I don't care about, but when guys score low on it, it is a story. He's a guy who's a junior college guy. There's tape on him last year from Tennessee. The guy is a freak athlete, looks like an elusive running back when he has the football, but from maybe a little bit immature as far as route running goes, and really the little subtle nuances that come along with being a receiver. And, can he be that Percy Harvin replacement? Can he be that guy who steps in for Harvin and fills his shoes? And I don't think he can. Not this year as a receiver. I think Vikings fans and the organization have to be patient with this guy. Let him come along slowly. Let him be a return man first this season. Get acclimated to the NFL game. Use him on offense, on reverses, slot screens, things of this nature where you just get the ball in his hands and let him grow as a receiver. And I think if you do that and you have patience with the guy, I think he could be in that Percy Harvin mold just a couple years down the line, maybe not right off the bat. All right, guys, that takes care of the NFC North. Moving right into the NFC South. The Falcons. The Falcons draft Desmond Trufant, the cornerback from Washington. Not only that, they trade up to get him. And there was some speculation that maybe Xavier Rhodes, who went later in the first round to the Vikings, should have been the pick there for the Falcons. That it was thought for a long time that Rhodes was the second corner in this draft next to D. Milliner, who, of course, went 9 to the Jets. And, did Atlanta make a mistake? As far as pros for Trufant, he has the ability to shadow receivers and get right in guys' hip pockets, and basically has the versatility, the change of direction to be able to do that. But obviously a detriment to him is he's not as big and physical at the point of attack like a guy like Rhodes. And there's all this obsession with the Brandon Browners, the Richard Sherman, the big physical corner. And, Trufant has the cover skills, but is not that big physical corner. Do you think that they should have drafted Xavier Rhodes instead? I like Trufant better, but I've been hearing all this stuff about Xavier Rhodes, so I thought it'd be worth bringing it up. The Carolina Panthers. In their draft this year, they picked Kenyon Barner, who is a guy, they draft a running back immediately. With this team especially having D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart, all the rumors sort of start. And, is Barner going to take one of their places? Are they going to cut D'Angelo Williams? And I think people are sort of overreacting a little bit. They're not going to cut D'Angelo Williams. They'll let D'Angelo Williams play out his contract this year. He's a free agent next year. Jonathan Stewart will then move into that, main running back position. Barner will be his backup and a scat back, third down back. And I think you just see the Panthers stash him this year because they don't even really need him as a return man. They have good return guys, the Panthers. So I don't know if there's a role really for Barner this year. And he'll be fun to watch, I guarantee you, in 2014. But probably not that much, certainly this season. Another draft, I'm sort of focusing on the draft here in the NFC South. And the Saints pick Kenny Vaccaro with that 15th pick overall in the first round. And, Malcolm Jenkins, I love the way he's handling the pick of Kenny Vaccaro. If you remember a couple years ago, the reaction Reggie Bush had when New Orleans picked Mark Ingram, it was sort of childish, and he didn't really take the high road at all and rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And Malcolm Jenkins is actually handling the pick of Kenny Vaccaro the total opposite way. He's welcoming the challenge. He's probably not embracing it, but he realizes it's a part of the game and it's a part of football, and he's not afraid of competition. I thought that's sort of how Reggie Bush came off, like basically telling the organization, okay, you want Mark Ingram? Well, I'm not even going to put up a fight. He can be the starter. Go ahead. Trade me. Release me. I'm handing the torch over to Mark Ingram before you even tell me that it's time to. So, again, love the approach Malcolm Jenkins is taking. The NFC West, our last division here, again, focusing on the draft. The Cardinals took Tyrann Mathieu in the third round, a much ballyhooed pick, a much talked about pick at the time. All the jokes followed, with smoke shops in Phoenix taking out full-page ads featuring his picture in them, which I think is a little bit out of line. And, people just bagging on him at every turn, with Trey Wingo handling his interview with Tyrann Mathieu the way he did, sort of trying to get Mathieu to take the bait, which he wouldn't do, which I think was a good sign. But, I just think that people need to let this guy play, let him, still sort of rehabilitate himself from the problems he had. You have to remember, he was going through this stuff only about 6 months ago with the arrests, with the getting kicked off of the LSU football team last fall. This guy is still a work in progress, and I just hope the media, not only in Phoenix but around the country, and the internet people or the message board people, whoever, just give this guy a fair shot and let him sort of prove his worth. And let him be the reason he doesn't play in the NFL. Let it be because his on-field play isn't good enough, not because we all sort of ran him out of the league. The Seattle Seahawks got some bad news recently. Greg Scruggs has a torn ACL, may miss the season. If you remember, Scruggs was a pretty good story. I think he played over 250 snaps with the Seahawks last year after being a 7th-round pick. And he wasn't tremendously productive, but still, a guy, a 7th-round pick, contributing at any level in the NFL is definitely a story. And, he tears his ACL, likely out for the season. Just sort of a bummer. I mean, the Seahawks, if any team can absorb a loss, it's definitely the Seahawks, okay? But just a bummer for Scruggs because, and anytime you can be a 7th-round pick and contribute right away, it's just a testament to hard work, and you hate to see a guy like that get hurt. Lastly, we'll end with the Rams, and, I saved the Rams for last because I have a bold prediction to make about the Rams. And their players more in particular. The Rams draft 2 receivers from West Virginia, Stedman Bailey, Tavon Austin. Both wide receivers. Both were Geno Smith's wide receivers at West Virginia. Tavon Austin, obviously the more heralded of the 2 guys. He was the 8th pick overall, thought to be a more dynamic player. But my bold prediction is, in 10 years, when we look back on the careers of Tavon Austin and Stedman Bailey, we will think of Stedman Bailey as the better receiver overall. Hey, You got to go out on a limb sometimes. I just did. Let me know if you guys can see that happening or if you think I'm way off. Either way, it'll be good to debate it. And guys, that takes care of our trip around the league here. This is so fun talking football. If you guys are interested in calling, definitely call in. Hit me up on either Twitter or, of course, on my email as well. And look, it was a pleasure talking to you guys again. The answer to our trivia question from yesterday, if you remember, I asked what 5 quarterbacks were drafted ahead of Dan Marino in the 1983 draft. And for bonus points, can you tell me the order they were drafted in? So I know you guys are probably up all night thinking about it, but I'll give you the answers here, okay? You had John Elway, who went before Dan Marino. You had Todd Blackledge, who went before Dan Marino in that draft. You had then Jim Kelly go before him in that draft to of course, the Buffalo Bills. You had Tony Eason go right after Jim Kelly to the New England Patriots. And then, of course, you had the much-maligned Ken O'Brien go to the New York Jets. And then lastly, to the Miami Dolphins at the end, the second-to-last pick of the first round. They took the legend Dan Marino. And if you haven't caught that Elway to Marino 30 for 30 documentary, I highly recommend you check that out because it's a serious documentary, and it's serious in the fact of how much that draft totally changed the NFL. So be sure to check that out. And guys, the trivia question for tomorrow: how many New York Jets are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and who are they? What are their names? So that's your trivia question for tomorrow, guys. That's going to wrap things up for today. Again, I'd like to say thank you to Ryan Alfiere from Bleacher Report and also NYJetsDraft.com. You can catch him on Twitter, Ryan Alf17. That's Ryan Alf17. Thanks again for listening, guys. I'll be back tomorrow night at 8:30. Again, talking about all 32 teams. Going to try to cook up a guest for you guys, too, in the kickoff spot. Thanks, as always, for listening. Have a great night. And, hey, look forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you.